My name is Graham Hughes. I am the first and so far only person to visit every country in the world without flying. I've been accredited by the Guinness Book of Records, by Ripley's Believe It or Not, and by me mum, which is the most important one, obviously. And so this is a new series for me. I've been making sort of political podcasts for the last couple of months, but what I really want to do, is get back to my old pleasure of travel. And obviously, no one can travel at the moment. We're banned from going in the EU, so that knocks a lot of countries out. And countries all around the world are currently banning British citizens from visiting, which is fair enough because there is a global pandemic going on. And I think that everything should have shut down months ago. But, you know, no one listens to me. What can I say? If anyone is out there watching on the chat, it would be great if you could just leave me a message saying, Graham, you crazy fool, what are you doing broadcasting this stuff at 10 o'clock at night when we're all got better things to do with our lives, I'm sure. But the idea of this is basically, I'll talk a bit about politics, but not about British politics necessarily, unless I'm talking about Britain. I'm not talking about American politics. I'm just talking about a different country each week and the sort of what it's like to travel there, a bit of the history, a potted history, the geopolitical situation of the place at the moment, and whether I think it's worth a place worth visiting. So because I like to do things. Oh, I've got a message from Martin Jones. Hello, Martin. He says, "How do from Berlin?" Oh, I wish I was in Berlin right now. Oh, you lucky Berliners, you crazy donuts. So, as I like the alphabet, it's a great bet. Of all the bets, it's the best. You might say it's the alpha bet. I'm going to start with Afghanistan, because that comes first alphabetically in a list of nations, because no one's had the foresight to make a nation with a double A at the beginning of its name, which would put them at the front. But it's going to be Afghanistan today. So I'm going to have a little bit of a chat about Afghanistan, which for many years I could not say. I could not say the word Afghanistan. I would say Afghanistan, which was no good whatsoever. Anyway, Afghanistan has only been around, as we know it, as a country for about 300 years. Before then, it was a place, as most places in the world were, and it was divided into separate little fiefdoms and kingdoms and places where people lived and cities, and sometimes they worked together, sometimes they fought with each other. Generally the same sort of thing that happens everywhere. But what's remarkable about Afghanistan is its geography. It's cursed by its geography and it's blessed by its geography. It's blessed in the fact that it was at the crossroads of the Silk Road. So if you were trying to get from Persia into India or across to China, if you're trying to get from the Middle East, if you're trying to get from Egypt or you're trying to get from Turkey or Greece or even ancient Rome or Carthage, and you were trying to get to China on the Silk Road, or you're trying to get down to India on the Spice Road, you really had to go through Afghanistan at some point. So it made it a very, very important strategic location. So important that when I think Alexander the Great went there, he was a bit annoyed because I think he'd just beaten Darius, not the X Factor finalist, but some other guy, Darius in a big battle. And Darius ran away to Afghanistan, and I think Alexander chased after him. But basically, Darius got betrayed by somebody. And by the time Alexander got there, I don't think Darius was there anymore. Gaz Riley, it was on the hippie trail years ago. Yeah, I'm going to come to that, Gaz. It was a big part of the hippie trail. Afghanistan was. But Alexander the Great spent a couple of years there. His wife, who he married, Roxanne, she was born there. Also, for people interested in the religion of Zoroastrianism, Zoroaster was born in what we now call Afghanistan. He was born there. Interestingly enough, I think Buddha was born in Nepal, wasn't he? Anyway, so back to Afghanistan. So Afghanistan was there at this crossroads of empires for many, many years until Genghis Khan came along. And Genghis Khan just loved to smash stuff up, and so he did. And then Timur Lane came along, and he loved to smash stuff up. Before or after Genghis Khan, I forget. It was a long time ago. He smashed everything up. And then people just kind of got along with things for many, many years. There was about 200 years of fighting before they succumbed to the Arab hordes who said, we've got to be Islamic now. And they're like, oh, okay, then we'll be Islamic. bit of a half-arsed bit of Islamicism at the time, as you actually find in Central Asia. It's about as much Islam as they could pack onto the back of their horses, as someone once said. Anyway, so Afghanistan, it existed. And in the 1800s, it suddenly became very, very, very important again. Why? Well, because in the north, there was the Russian Empire, which still pretty much exists as the CIS, the Commonwealth of Independent States. And that includes Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, and Turkmenistan. They're all to the north of Afghanistan. And then to the south of Afghanistan, you had India, which at the time was India, but British India. Not, as it is now, 3 countries called Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh. And so basically, Afghanistan was a buffer zone between these 2 empires. And the Great Game, which is a tale of subterfuge and counterfuge and fuselages and all kinds of things that went on in the 1800s. There's a really good book called Flashman. It's actually, I think it's based on Boris Johnson, to be honest. But even though this guy is a scumbag, thief, rapist, cad, he still manages to somehow have more redeeming qualities than Boris Johnson. But there you go. Anyway, Flashman is about, the first Flashman book, is about the first Anglo-Afghan War, which took place in the 1830s. And this was the cause of, triggered off by the retreat from Kabul. There was this guy called something Elephantine or Elephant or something. I can't remember his name. It was a long time ago. And I'm not drunk, by the way. And Bangladesh means land of hemp. That's very interesting, Rich Howells. Thank you very much. Buddha lived on hemp seed under a tree, apparently for 6 months. Well, there you go. I'd love to go to Central Asia, do the stands, as they say. Well, I've done the stands. All my friends call Stan. And also I've been to Central Asia. So, I've done it. But I wasn't there long enough to... I was in there for a couple of weeks. I wasn't there long enough to really get to know the place as I would like to. So I wouldn't mind going back. But going back to Afghanistan, there was this famous retreat from Kabul. And what happened was there was British militia, British people in Kabul. And basically the local warlord or whatever, Mohammed Dost, he said, "Oi, piss off." And they went, "Okay, then, we better go because they're outnumbered." And he said, "I will give you safe passage all the way to Pakistan." Well, what's now Pakistan? India. And they went, "Okay, then." And they set off, thousands of people on this trail along the desert highway. And they all got picked off one by one and they all died except for one person who came home and told the tale. This began an important thing in people's minds, right? That you've got to understand. For the last 200 years, no one's ever won a war in Afghanistan. This is going to come back time and time again. Like, seriously, no one's ever won a war in Afghanistan. You just don't. Even when you think you've won the war, you haven't really won the war. Anyway, so the Great Game went on all the way through the 1800s, and it was fought between the British and the Russians, which culminated in the Third Afghan War, I guess, This is after the First World War, so this is 1920s it went up to. And the Third Afghan War, the Third Anglo-Afghan War ended with, guess what? You're never going to guess this, Britain being defeated by the Afghans, because that's what always happens. Don't go into war in Afghanistan. I'm going to keep saying this because it's a really, really bad idea. Anyway, so, would you believe it? The Afghans now have their own country, and they call it Afghanistan. And about 10 years later, it's recognised by the United States. This is before the UN existed, obviously, but that was as good as being recognised by the United Nations as an independent state. And it muddled along for a while. It had a king. He didn't want to be an emir. He wanted to be a king, like the king of Saudi Arabia. It had a prime minister who was a cousin of the king who wanted reform, and he wanted women's rights, and he wanted women to be educated, and he didn't seem that averse to democracy, a little bit, but this was during the 1970s, and at the time, Afghanistan became like this amazing place on the hippie highway. So people had this route from London to Kathmandu in Nepal, and everyone used to go through Afghanistan, and everyone said it was fantastic, and it was full of almighty weed. Obviously, they mean weeds that grow in the ground and strangle the flowers, I assume. Everyone seemed to really love Afghanistan, and people were really lovely. The Afghan people were famed for their hospitality, which is something that I experienced when I was there, and also in Central Asia. Just the most hospitable people in the world. Them and the Iranians, it just blows my mind. I mean, there's this phrase, a saying that I heard when I was there, which I'll repeat again and again whenever I'm talking about Persia, Central Asia, Iran. It's always be good to strangers because one day you might be the stranger. Which is just a great way of living. It's just be nice to people because one day that might be you. There you go. That's all you need. You don't need a golden rule. You just need that. Gaz got din in. I thought Johnson based himself on Flashman, said Adam Wright. Yeah, I think he did. Flashman's a horrible, horrible character. He's very much an anti-hero. He's a coward. He's a thief. Oh my God. He's like a scuffier version of Flashman, except Flashman was quite clever, and I don't think Boris Johnson is. That's an aside. Anyway, so things kicked off in the 1970s because the communists took over, and this was a small party who didn't really have a good hold on power. But in 1979, the Russians, the Soviet Union, thought, I know, let's invade Afghanistan. Because historically, that's always worked out so well. I'm joking. It really, really hasn't. It hasn't worked out at all. Should I put this on I should put this on a little thing so you can see that it's Afghanistan. Maybe I'll put it on this random hard drive that was sitting there. There you go. Now, when you look at the video, you'll be able to see what country I'm talking about. Maybe I should do that for every country. Although I don't have every Lonely Planet for every country. I do, but there's a lot of them where it's like the Lonely Planet for Europe, and it covers lots of countries at once. Anyway, back to the history of Afghanistan. So, the Afghans invaded. The Afghans invaded. The Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan in 1979, and this led to the American boycott of the Olympics. I think was it next year, and then the Soviet Union boycott in 1984, which was a flashback for that. And what the Americans did, which was quite cunning. And if you watch the film Charlie Wilson's War, or you've read the book, even better, you'll know all about this. The Americans basically funded the Mujahideen. The Mujahideen were freedom fighters. If you ever see, I think it's The Living Daylights. There's a James Bond film where he joins the Mujahideen. Like, seriously, James Bond, British spy, joins the Mujahideen. Okay, fair enough. Bit weird. Thomas is like, 1979, Russians invaded, end of story. Right, yeah, it was all over then. It was all over. No, unfortunately not. The Americans funded, via Israel, strangely enough, the Mujahideen to have weapons that they could shoot down warplanes with. And it's one of those things, it's like Vietnam, it's like the Battle of Endor. When you are dealing with people who know the terrain and you don't know the terrain, they're always going to have one up on you. They're always going to have one up on you. No matter if they're fighting with sticks and stones and you're fighting with weapons, doesn't matter. If they know the terrain, if they know the geography, they're in a plum situation and you're not. Anyway, so this war dragged on for about 10 years. I think the peace accords were signed in about 1989, and Soviet Union withdrew. They withdrew from Afghanistan. And it was a huge humiliation for the Soviet Union. In fact, soldiers coming back to Moscow and to Vladivostok and to St. Petersburg were not greeted with love and attention. They were greeted with contempt and ridicule, and some people were really horrible to them because they felt like these soldiers had lost the war on the behalf of the Soviet Union. But the failure to win in Afghanistan, coupled with the fall of the Berlin Wall in November that year, and also, just the way the world was going at that time, because you had the Soviet Union, which had so many amazing things, like a space program, had tons of nuclear weapons, megatons of nuclear weapons, couldn't afford to feed its people. So, problem, economics, not great in old 1980s Soviet Union. You had Mikhail Gorbachev famously brought in glasnost and perestroika, openness, and everyone got a chance to say what they thought, and what they thought was, this is a bad idea. And the Soviet Union collapsed and split into 15 countries, many of which are now to the north of Afghanistan. So, as I said, the stands, except for Afghanistan itself and Pakistan, which are already independent. And so, yeah, this point in world history, you think, wow, the Americans won. Yeah. Without firing up... Oh, no, they did fire bullets. Well, they won the Cold War, so that's great. America didn't fall apart, but the Russian Empire did. The Soviet Union did. Stop calling it the Russian Empire, Graham. Racist.
Benign. What was perplexed about brother? What? I've been watching this for 5 minutes and I am perplexed. Oh, I'm talking about Afghanistan. I'm talking about Afghanistan. Johnson should have modelled himself on Lord Flashshot. Hurrah! They still have the old US weapons. Rambo 3 joins the Mujahideen against the Soviets. Yes! Rambo joins them as well. So you got Rambo and James Bond. In the 1980s, they joined basically Osama bin Laden's outfit. Anyway, look, the Americans had all this money that they gave to the Mujahideen, to the freedom fighters, whatever you want to call them, in Afghanistan. And then they had this meeting where they said, should we pay for the rebuilding of the country that's been war-torn for the last 10 years? And they went, no. And I'm sure someone at that meeting pointed out there were loads of angry young men who lost brothers and lost friends and family and lots of weapons and no schools and no hospitals and no roads that go anywhere. We need to spend money on infrastructure, otherwise bad things will happen. And this is a very good argument for overseas aid, by the way. If you interfere in someone else's country and, you smash it up, whatever, or even if someone else smashes it up, or even if they smash their own country up, it is in your interests to help them. Not go in, not bomb people, not drop Semtex and explosives and lay down landmines. No, just help them get back on their feet. But the Americans decided not to do this. It was too busy listening to, I don't know, Nirvana or something. Anyway, so the 90s rattled on, and Afghanistan predictably collapsed into civil war. And the victor of the civil war was a group called the Taliban, who we all know and dislike. Now, the Taliban, as you may know, were very, very fundamentalist, kind of crazy people who just didn't like anything. They didn't like anything. They didn't like women learning. They didn't like that. And they didn't like football. So they used the stadium where they played the football to execute people. And what they particularly they didn't like Buddhas, right? There was the Bamiyan Buddhas, right? Which these beautiful Buddhas that were carved out of rock from back when Afghanistan was Buddhist. And they blew them up, which was terrible. And also they banned kites. You ever read the book The Bike? The bike? The bike bump. No, that doesn't right. The bike corner. No. The kite runner. By who is it? Kahoni. Oh, I can't remember his name. Anyway, the kite runner. It's very, very, very good. Khalid Husseini, I think, and it's about Afghanistan. So worth a read, along with Flashman and the Lonely Planet Guide. Plug, and my book. Obviously, I didn't go to Afghanistan in the first book. I go in the second book, which I'm writing at the moment, but I'll come back to that. So, so the Taliban took over, and basically they allowed people to set up training camps for terrorism in their country because they thought, well, what the hell? No one cares about us. No one notices us. So why would they care? I guess. Another danger of just ignoring things, letting them fester. And on September 11th, 2001, this country being ignored and all the money of Saudi Arabia sort of smashed together in 9/11. And after that, there was the American invasion of Afghanistan, which is still going on today. There are still American troops nearly 20 years later. 2 decades later. God, that makes me feel old. 2 decades later, there's still American troops in Afghanistan. So what happened was they invaded. Quite quickly, they overpowered the Taliban. They kicked them out of Kabul. And then they actually, give them their due, they did start rebuilding. They started rebuilding Afghanistan. However, as you're going to see, I'm with it now. I was just reading the rules about support bubbles and feeling disorientated. What? That wasn't me. So I'm just going to take you on a little tour here. This is Afghanistan here. And we can zoom in a little bit, I think. And you can see there's Kabul, the capital. And that's where things are going on. And you can see, if I can use my mouse here, you can see these roads around here. Most of these roads were either built or updated by the Americans or by the NATO forces. The important one was this one. It went from Kabul to Kandahar, up to Herat, and then up to Mazar-i Sharif, and then back down to Kabul. They called this the Ring Road. They called it the Ring Road. And basically what that did was it was supposed to bring together the country, because it had always been a bunch of warring areas. I mean, it had never been a cohesive state in the way that other countries, more established countries, might be today. And this road was seen as an important way of making it so that the whole country came together, and it was easy to get from one big city to the next. Unfortunately, they never finished building the road. The Taliban resurged. They blew bits of the road up. The security that was required for building the road was just insane. Like, it costs millions of dollars just to build a mile of road because of all the security that was required, because they were being people were taking pop shots. It's a very dangerous place to be. It still is a very dangerous place to be. I think the deputy mayor or someone of Kabul was killed in just the last few months, and we've seen 5 journalists killed since November. It's still a very dangerous place. No one ever wins a war in Afghanistan. So just to bring you up to date now, there are actually peace talks going on in Doha between the Taliban and the government of Afghanistan. And what's on they've sorted out their agenda. That's good. That took a couple of months to organise, but now they're going to sit down, they're going to talk, and hopefully this year we might see some progress. Fingers crossed. Afghanistan, it's a bit like the Labour Party. You want the best for it, but it always seems to find a way to let you down. And yeah, Afghanistan, it's got some of the most beautiful, wonderful, caring, loving people in the world living in it. But it's damned by geography. And here's an interesting point, right? There's a really good book called The Bottom Billion. I have to find out who wrote it. It's called The Bottom Billion. I think it's in that one. He talks about being damned by geography. It's really interesting. So all the countries in, let's say, South America. South America is 12 countries and French Guiana. The poorest 2 countries in that continent are Paraguay and Bolivia. Now, what is unique about them compared with all the other nations of South America? Well, they're landlocked. They're landlocked. Afghanistan is landlocked. It makes it really, really difficult to do anything. You can't fly stuff in. Botswana is landlocked, but it has diamonds. It flies out diamonds. That's okay. Also, it's neighbouring Namibia. It's also neighbouring South Africa. You know, that's not too bad. That's not too bad. They do have good roads, good infrastructure in Namibia, good infrastructure in South Africa. If they need to get something brought in on a ship, they can bring it to one of the big ports in either of those countries, and it can be brought into Botswana without too much difficulty. Obviously, it gets held up on the border and stuff, but there's roads that have actually made of tarmac and aren't all bumpy and crazy and going everywhere. If you are Burkina Faso, or you're Niger, or Chad, or the Central African Republic, or Burundi, forget about it. You're in so much trouble just because of the way that the lines have been drawn. And it's very interesting that the landlocked countries of Europe, with the exception of probably Switzerland and, you know, obviously it's little city-states like San Marino, but the big countries, nearly all of them that are landlocked are actually on navigable rivers. So you can get trade up and down the rivers. So it's not too bad. The Danube goes through about 11 countries or something crazy like that. But the countries that you see on the map, generally that are landlocked, generally speaking, didn't draw their own borders. So Afghanistan didn't draw its own borders. Its borders were drawn by the British and the Russians, pretty much. They went, right, this is where the British end. This is where the British territory ends. This is where the Russian territory ends. You know, and this is the bit in the middle. And obviously, all those countries in Africa, no one in Africa drew their own bloody borders. Not even Abyssinia, not even Ethiopia, the only country that wasn't colonized, didn't get to draw its own borders. They were drawn by white people, by Europeans in, Paris in 1885. They sat down with a map and went, the map of India, the division of India between what was then West Pakistan, East Pakistan, and India, was drawn up by an Englishman who had never, ever been to India. But at least they aren't landlocked. At least they aren't landlocked. There are, I guess, Bhutan, Nepal, mountain kingdoms, okay. Mongolia, again, Mongolia sandwiched between 2 big empires, between the Russian Empire and the Chinese Empire. It's more that other countries drew their borders around it rather than it drew its own boundaries. through war, conquest, whatever. But if you haven't got access to the water, you're stuffed. You're just stuffed. Just imagine you're trying to get a ship worth of stuff. So a modern ship now, a nice big ship, post-Panamax ship, probably hold about 17,000 20-foot boxes. Okay, so that's TEU, 20-foot equivalent units. 17,000 trucks you would need to carry all them off one ship. One ship, that's one ship, 17,000 trucks. Okay, so imagine you're trying to get everything. This never happens because worldwide logistics doesn't work like this. But imagine if you were, let's just say Rwanda, and you're like, right, we need to get 17,000 truck worths of stuff into our country. Well, how are you going to get it there? You could either go through the Democratic Republic of Congo. Good luck with that. Or you could go through Kenya and Uganda and then bring it in. Yeah, good luck with that. Or you could go through Tanzania. You could bring it in through Tanzania. Every time you're having to bring it in through someone else's country. And so you're having to pay tax to somebody else. You have to pay roads tax to someone else. You have to buy fuel off other people 17,000 times. Whereas if you've got a port, the ship just comes along, sits there, and you take the boxes off, and they're in your country. Ta-da! So, all things being equal, no country in their right mind would decide to be landlocked. If they were landlocked, they would hope to have very good neighbours who were friendly and nice and didn't beat them up. And they would hope to have some kind of unique thing that they could sell the world in order to make some money. Now, Afghanistan does have something unique to sell the world in order to make lots of money, and that thing is heroin. And interestingly, heroin isn't illegal in Britain. You are actually allowed to be prescribed heroin. It's illegal to have it if you don't have a prescription. But there's a company in Scotland, I think, called McFarlane and Sons, something like that. And they actually have the only medical contract for bringing heroin into the country. But there are other opium derivatives that you can use from the poppies that grow in Afghanistan. And weirdly, this is the weirdest thing. So the Taliban is possibly the most well-funded military group in the world that isn't a part of a government, okay? Why? Because 90% of the world's heroin comes from Afghanistan. Now, you would think, well, we do need opiates. We do need these painkillers for medical purposes. So why don't we just buy them legally? Well, the US, being absolute geniuses that they are, and possibly the UK as well, because we're not far behind, decided that they would ban the sale of poppy derivatives from Afghanistan, even to legitimate sources. So what are you going to do? What else grows there? I mean, the place is pretty barren. This picture behind me, this is a picture that I got out of the cab that I was in Herat in Afghanistan. You can see, there's a couple of trees there, but there's no green grass. I mean, it's a pretty difficult life to grow stuff. It used to be famous for raisins. Afghanistan was huge for raisins everywhere. Afghan raisins were the best raisins in the world, but since all this civil war and the Taliban and the Russian, the Soviet invasion, the US invasion, the NATO invasion, whatever you want to call it, it's all gone to shit. It's all gone to shit. And it comes down to, if you are going to meddle in the affairs of other countries, it is really no good turning up and thinking that you're going to enforce democracy on a place, because it just doesn't work like that. The people have got to want democracy. In the same way that I will admit, I don't want to see another referendum for joining the EU that ends up with 52% to join and 48% to leave, or not join. And that would annoy me, because I think that we need to have a situation where a good majority of the country are with it. Are just saying, yeah. I would go as far as Scotland as well and say, for the Scottish referendum that's coming up, because it is coming up, I'd like it to be 66% to leave the UK. Because it's such a seismic event. I don't think it should be 50-50. It will be 50-50, and obviously that'll be seen as legit, but he's changing the constitution of a country. You've got to have the will behind it of the people. These people didn't fight for democracy. They fought for their brothers and sisters and their families. They fought because they saw this foreign invader coming in to their country and attacking them. And they were like, what are you doing? And they picked up a gun and started shooting back because they saw themselves as defending their family. They weren't fighting for democracy. They weren't fighting to watch Netflix or something. They were fighting for their life, essentially. And these heady ideas, which are only put in afterwards, don't forget. Most people who were fighting in World War I were conscripted. People in World War II were drafted. Vietnam, they were drafted. People weren't fighting in Vietnam. Americans weren't fighting in Vietnam because they really felt like they needed to represent America's interests in Indochina. Yeah. Well, no, actually. The people of Vietnam were fighting for their lives. Yeah, you could tell. And I don't think a lot of them were communist in that sort of mindset of I'm communist, I've got to die for this cause. I think they were fighting because they saw an obviously foreign invader coming into their country, and they went, screw this, I'm gonna fight against this, I'm not having this. As actually, I think most people would. But there you go. I'm going to jump into some of the messages here, which is whereas the only superpower in the world has coasts on both major oceans. No coincidence. That's from Martin Jones. You're absolutely right, Martin. Daniel Jones. No relation, I don't know. Your attractive message is still visible. Oh, don't have arguments while I'm talking, please. Just Elephant Stone. Sorry, Klein. Elephant Stone. I knew it was something like that. Something to do with elephants. They've been there. They all drink rye. Daniel Jones, not realised, want truth in every... No arguments. No, people having fights. For us that are crap at geography, you need maps behind you to point with a stick. Yeah, I mean, I might do that actually, but it's a bit difficult. The screen behind me is obviously a green screen. But there might be a way of sort of getting the Afghanistan map, which I have here, make it... You see, the problem is, I had a little play with this before I came online, and the problem that I found was... there's the map there. The problem I found was that basically if I did it small in the corner, it's quite difficult to read. They don't make the labels that big for the countries. But what's worth having a look at is, like I say, it's landlocked. Uzbekistan above it is landlocked as well. And if I zoom out even more, you'll be able to see that that's it sort of highlighted there. It is right in the middle. It's right in the middle of Asia there. It's really quite impressive. If you say the Eurasian continent, you can see why on that map, why it was sort of a crossroads of the world. And I'll tell you what I could do actually, is I could, let's have a look. I could probably put this behind me. I don't know if this will work. This might not work. This might look a bit weird. Let's see. Let's put that there. Oh, I've disappeared. Okay, you're going to have to just bear with me for a second. No, okay, look, that seemed like a good idea at the time, but it really wasn't. I was going to make it appear behind me, but then I'll be doing this, and it'll just be a bit weird. So I'm not. Right, okay, back to the messages. Graham Hughes, missing third host of Map Men, which is another great YouTube series. Map Men, which I absolutely love. Love Map Men. Very, very funny show. It's the guy who does Unfinished London, which is another great YouTube show. There's not enough of them. But yeah, if you check that out, Map Men, and they talk about the craziest borders in the world. They talk about places, there's a place between Sudan and Egypt where no one wants to live. And also, interestingly, they did one a few months ago where it was the oldest border in the world. And it's actually the border between Scotland and England, which I thought fascinating because, right, this is according to Map Men, and I checked it out afterwards. I got online and went, hang on, this is true. Basically, there were two great supercontinents, weren't there? There was a God Wonderland and Laurasia, something like that. Basically, Scotland came from one of them and England came from the other and then smushed into each other. So that's why a bit of Scotland had its own very unique geology and different flora and fauna because it was part of a different continent. Really, really interesting. What? Okay, Young, whatever you say. I've still got Paul Hardcastle's 7-inch. What? Oh, yes, yeah, sorry. Is that 19? The average age of the soldiers in Vietnam. Is the red dragon shagging the banner of St. George on the mic? No. I'm going to grab this. I'm sorry if it makes a horrible noise. It might do. But if you look very, very closely, you can see it's a little... Oh, it's out of focus. Focus. Come on, focus. Oh, you can't really see it. It's basically a dragon doing a face palm overlaid on the flag of St. George. And it says underneath in nice friendly letters, Wangland. I'm going to leave that off for a moment because, not because it's distracting, but because I know if I touch this mic in any way, it throws a fit and makes loads of noise. Been there as well. I was in Hobart. I've not been to Hobart. The war in Afghanistan after 9/11 was distinctly odd, since the terrorists were Saudi and Bin Laden was found in Pakistan. Yes. But the Taliban were very bad boys. So the Taliban, I was grateful that the Taliban were gotten rid of as a government, but like with a lot of these things where you go in all guns blazing, it's a case of, trying to smash a walnut with a sledgehammer. It's too much. And unless you're going to sit there and meticulously put the walnut back together with sticky tape and glue, unless you're prepared to do that, don't smash the bloody walnut. Calm down, bruv. Is there any undercover Met police spies here disguised as neoliberals? No. You see, because the Met, I assume you're talking about the Metropolitan Police, they're run by a woman called Cressida Dick. And she is part of the chumocracy because she went to a private school. Like all of the politicians that you've ever heard of, everyone who works in the media, everyone who's British and acts, everyone in the judiciary, pretty much everyone who went to Oxbridge, pretty much everyone in MI5, MI6, everyone who's an officer in the Army, Navy, RAF, pretty much everyone in charge of the country. So, no, we didn't go to a private school, me and the other people watching this, who are my regulars. Hello. No, we're not being paid by the Met Police to make videos about Afghanistan. Anyway, in 2010, I went to Afghanistan in April 2010. And I'll show you on the map. Get the map back up, Graham. I'll show you on the map. This is all live. This is amazing. It's amazing what you can do with modern technology these days. There you go. Right. Good. I've got the Hughes of the World logo in the top there. That's cool. So if I head over to the map and zoom in, you can see Afghanistan there. It's a kind of funny shaped country. This bit over here is called the Wakhan corridor. And you can only go there between May and September. I wouldn't go there at any other time, but that's the Wakhan corridor there. A nice trek through the mountains if you fancy it. There's the country there, and you can see the ring road that I was talking about. If you follow sort of this line, I could do with a mouse pointer. Oh, there you go. It's a cross, but you can see what I mean. This is the ring road that sort of has half been blown up and it's not very well reconstructed. But that was the road that was supposed to connect everything up. Now, see this part of the road here. It's not part of the road because the road goes up to Mazar-i-Sharif. But this crossroads here, which isn't coming up with a name at the moment, is Herat. I'll zoom in a bit more. There you go. That's Herat. And that's where I've been. I've been to Herat. So I came down from Turkmenistan, which is this country here. So if I zoom out a bit more, you'll be able to see. This is Turkmenistan, this country here. And I came down to Herat, about here, where the pointer is. And then I went across into Iran. This is Iran here. This Google map could really do with some more labels. We need more labels. I'm going to make a thing and say to Google, put more labels on stuff. I could probably fix the layers, couldn't I? Maybe Cressida Dick has ambitions to be PM of Wangland. Well, maybe. Let's have a look. Greetings from Slovenia. Hello Slovenia. How you doing? You're one of my favourite EU countries. Capital Ljubljana, which I probably mispronounced. I went to the Skeleton Bar on the Ljubljana River. And you go down and they've got these mad cocktails and you can actually, there's a little bit where you can actually sit on the water pretty much on a little sort of veranda that goes out the back. Great city. I was very drunk. In the war, I've read that one. Map Men Rules, yes. People talk about the Paul Hardcore original. Wasn't Rooster by Alice in Chains? Wasn't that by Alice in Chains? Wasn't that about Afghanistan? Vietnam. So why are we talking about Vietnam? Should be talking about Afghanistan. Are you talking about Albania next, Graham? Yes, Gaz, I'm talking about Albania next, and then Algeria, because alphabet. I'm a bit torn about certain countries. Do I do Britain for B or Great Britain, or do I wait all the way till I get to U for UK? Because honestly, if I do one of these a week, by the time I get to the UK, it will be in about 4 years' time, and the UK won't exist anymore, and I'll have gone past E for England. Oh no, I can do Wangland, can't I? Yeah, Wales and England. Graham 24/7 YouTube. Why don't we have it? BBC Hughes 24. Well, it's funny you should say that, Si, because one of the fundraising ideas that I had for Rejoin EU was a 24-hour broadcast-a-thon. I'll drive everyone mad. But I thought, right, what I could do is basically play the entire Doom series, like on Twitch, play the games. So you can watch me play the game, and I'll just talk shit about politics and travel and religion and whatever other crap comes into my head. Pop culture. Yeah, it's all good. Benign. Never too late to fondle that lovely 7-inch. And Andorra, yes. Andorra. I don't know how I'm going to fill up a whole hour talking about Andorra, to be honest with you, but I will endeavour. I will try. Got some personal anecdotes that I'm sure you'll love. But yeah, I was in Herat for a day. I arrived early in the morning. I was the first to cross the border into Afghanistan. I was in the back of a minibus getting to the city, and I didn't have an armed guard or anything with me. I had quite a heavy backpack. It's quite a small backpack, but it was quite heavy. And I asked if I could leave it in a shop, and I paid a guy to put it in his shop, and he wanted to have a look inside it, so we opened it up and had a look inside it, and he said, yeah, that's fine. And I went over to the fort, this magnificent fort that had just been helped to be restored by I think UNESCO there in Herat. And then I headed over to the mosque, and there's this beautiful, absolutely stunning mosque there, which is it's impeccable. I mean, it's a really, really beautiful building. And then after the mosque, I headed off to where did I go after that? I went to get some food. So I had some kebabs. That's the big food over there. So meat on a stick, put it in some bread, pull it out. There you go, happy day. Put some spicy sauce on it, which keeps me happy. And it was locally made bread, where they get the dough and they flip it from hand to hand, and they sort of slap it on the side of a kiln style oven, and it cooks, and then ate that down. It was good. And one of the things like you kind of think when you're traveling is how the stuff that we take for granted, like salads. Yeah, good luck getting that. Do you know what I mean? It's like if they can get lettuce, they'll be made up, but it's not something that's usually on the menu in these places. But so I had something to eat. And I just mooched around. There was a guy who was a money changer, and he had all these notes, like I've got on my table here, from all over the world. And he actually had an old 1960s £1 British note that he told me was given to him by someone on the hippie trail back in the 60s. And we had a chat about that. They spoke really good English. And yeah, I didn't feel threatened. I wasn't particularly impressed by the way that the women there were dressed as big blue ghosts. Not my style, I have to admit. And I don't feel like this is a cause for feminism to say, if they want to dress like that, then it's up to them. Yeah, in a way, but the reality is that 99 times out of 100, it's a male relative saying you have to dress like this or else. So that, threat of violence. And also, it's this thing that we see time and time again, not just in Islamic and Muslim countries, but in Hindu countries, culture, in India, in Buddhist culture, in Sri Lanka, in Christian culture, around Europe and around South America, Central America. This idea that if women dress provocatively, they're asking for it. And the level that you have to go, well, do you know what? I don't think showing your face is too provocative. Do you know what I mean? I mean, if it is, that's a bit weird. But it's not the best way to run a place, as far as I'm concerned. But if Afghanistan could get its shit together, it would be a fantastic place to visit. And it's really sad that it's not. It's really sad that it's been ripped apart by other countries meddling in its affairs in bad ways, not setting up peace summits, to try and bring peace and try and get, kind of trying to help them. It's always been another agenda. It's always been, let's get at the British, let's get at the Soviets, let's get at the Americans, instead of actually going, what's best for the people of Afghanistan. That's something I'm going to talk about a lot when I talk about India, Pakistan, and Kashmir. Now, no one ever asks the Kashmiri people what they want, which annoys me. And when people go, what side are you on, Graham? Are you on the side of India? Are you side of Pakistan? Or are you on the side of Israel? Or are you side of the Palestinians? And I'm not on either side. I'm not on the side of North Korea or South Korea. I'm not on the side of Northern Cyprus or European Cyprus, if you want to call it that. I'm on the side of peace. And if I could help get these countries together and get them talking and get them around the conference table and fashion something out, then that would be a good thing to do. But the worst thing I could do as, a gobby white middle-class scouser is to say, I'm going to take a side because one of these sides is irredeemably wrong and the other one is irredeemably right. Because usually that's not the case. Usually there's been atrocities on both sides. And whenever you get people talking about it, not on the level of a symposium or an actual, proper peace talks or whatever, but it always comes down to your people did this and your people did that and blah, 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 and it goes on forever. And it's so sad because 9 times out of 10, the people who are having these civil conflicts, like we saw in the breakup of Yugoslavia, like we see in Northern Ireland, it's the tyranny of small differences. It's like, what's the difference between Croatia and Serbia? What's the big split? Why are they so different? Well, because Croatia writes with Roman text and Serbia writes with Cyrillic text. The same language, just the letters are different when you write them. There you go. That's worth decades, centuries of conflict, isn't it? No, it's not. What's the difference between a Catholic and a Protestant? What is it? Transubstantiation. That's the process of when you have when you take communion, you drink the wine. Protestants believe that it's just symbolic of Jesus' blood, whereas Catholics believe that, they're supposed to believe, that it turns into blood in your mouth. Both run by unelected, I guess the pontiff is elected by the cardinals, isn't he? But both run by not really democratically elected leaders who decide what people should believe and then just declare things like limbo doesn't exist anymore one day after centuries of people thinking that limbo totally existed. No, Daniel, but it can be other men. People asking, people having conversations. I don't know if anyone's mentioned this, but the channel Indigo Traveller did a great series on Afghanistan. Okay, I'll try checking that out. I do like watching YouTube videos. I don't just watch my own videos back because that would be weird. Daniel Jones says, hang on, the answer to certain men telling women to dress a certain way can't be other men telling women to dress a certain way, can it? No, Daniel, it can't. And I'm not saying that they should dress any particular way. That's the thing. I think you should, again, it's like saying to Kashmiris, what do you want? I'll stay out of it, Just do what you like. As long as you're not actively harming somebody else. Like Swift in Gulliver's Travels, big enders and little enders eating a boiled egg. Yeah. So Gulliver's Travels is one of my favourite books by Jonathan Swift. He was a fantastic satirist of his day. It's the 1700s. It's going back a bit, isn't it? And Gulliver's Travels, this guy travels around the world, goes to all these fantastical kingdoms and places, and he goes to this place where there's these two people who've been fighting for God knows how long, and it's like, well, what are we fighting over? And it's like, well, the correct way to eat a boiled egg is you tap the little end, but they think it's the big end. I mean, come on. And he's spot on. It was 200 odd years ago. He was spot on then, and he's still right today. Most of my bucket list spots are Iran. I'm gonna have to wait a while to see around the around cities. Yeah, Iran, one of my favourite places on earth, and I'll get to Iran eventually. It's going to take a while. No, actually, hopefully this year I'll get to Iran. But definitely one of my favourite cities. And what I'd like to do is, if I've got a bit more prep for making these in the future, I might be able to run some video so you can see what I did in the place where I went to. I've got a lovely video of Afghanistan, but I didn't have time to sort it all out. Sorry, we were somehow had this lockdown dumped on us last night in the UK at 8 o'clock by our idiot leader, and as a result, I wasn't as prepared for my first episode of Hughes of the World as I would have liked to have been. But it's coming up to 11 o'clock now, so I'm going to sign off soon. I hope I've educated you a little bit about Afghanistan. I went there on my own 10 years ago, didn't die. Good. Yeah. Everyone I know who's been there, not in the military, not for the army, but people who have mad enough to have gone there and visited the place, very much enjoyed it and said people were really lovely. And I think it's that kind of welcoming that you get when you go somewhere like that most tourists don't go to. You know, if you go to somewhere where they're not used to seeing tourists, they don't have the same sort of attitude of like, oh, what are you doing here? You know, why don't you go back where you came from? It's sort of more like a sort of mixture of curiosity, but also this sort of good intentions, especially when you're in a country with a bad reputation, I guess. People try their best to show you that their country isn't like that, and they themselves are good people. And and it goes back to what I said earlier about be good to strangers, because one day you might be the stranger. It's nearly midnight in Europe. Look, Europe is a made up part of the world. It's actually Asia, isn't it? It's just a peninsula of Asia. This could be a whole topic for debate, but it's interesting that there's a definite divide between South America and North America. There's a definite divide between Africa and Asia. There's a definite divide between Australia and everywhere else in the world, and Antarctica and everywhere else in the world. But what's the divide between Europe and Asia? Well, people say, it's the Bosphorus, but okay, but going further north, where is it? And there's so many arguments about this, and this is why Kazakhstan is in UEFA. Kazakhstan, okay, you're in Europe, why not? Which looks to most people like it's in the middle of Asia. Looking forward to a few of these to take my mind off politics. Yes, thanks, guys. This is why I want to do this. I want to talk about travel, and it sucks being stuck at home. Last year was the first year that I can remember. First year I can remember where I didn't go to another country. Whether it was going to France or going to Ireland or somewhere close or going further afield, an entire year stuck in the UK with a bunch of people who, don't have our best interests at heart, running the government. Not been great at all. The divide is who invented the vodka. It wasn't the Russians. Yeah, you can start that. The Urals and the Caucasus. Yeah, well, the Ural Mountains, I mean, they're not a significant mountain range in the same way that the Himalayas are. And the Himalayas only divide the continent from the subcontinent. So is Europe a subcontinent? Is this going to be like where Pluto gets downgraded from being a planet to being a dwarf planet? Maybe we should think about doing this for Europe and downgrade it to a subcontinent of Asia, or maybe just call the whole place Eurasia and just be done with it, because it's a cultural thing, isn't it? It's just that people in Europe want to be European, and people in Asia don't really call themselves Asians very much. Americans do. Americans call people from India Asians, which is really confusing to all the people who aren't from who don't do that. We're sort of like, no, Asia's a massive place, and it has got India and China, but it's also got the Middle East and Iran and also Southeast Asia, which is very different. You could say that East Timor is part of Asia, which is mad. And one of the most exciting things that I think exists at the moment is the fact that you could drive from Scotland to Singapore without having to take a boat. That's phenomenal, isn't it? Top of Scotland to Singapore without having to take a ferry. put your car on a ferry. I know it's going to be difficult getting through China, but it can be done. And one day, you might be able to do it on the train. But you can't at the moment. There's a bit of a gap. Okay, right. I'm going to call it a night now. Thank you so much for your messages. Me too. The guy's saying I've been travelling since 1981. Boy, are my legs tired. Dun, 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 dun. The divide. Oh, I've read that one. I agree. Subcontinents. Yes, Thomas Page is subcontinent. So England is a lonely island in the Atlantic off the subcontinent of Europe. The European identity as it exists now is very much a product of the place tearing itself apart from most of recorded history, and no bad thing to what? Well, yeah, exactly. But the reason why the European border is down the Ural Mountains is because of Peter the Great of Russia, who wanted to win them on the West, and he was a Europhile. He loved Europe. And he went on this grand embassy, which I might talk about in another episode, all around Europe for a few years. It was a bit of it was a fact-finding mission. And there was a bit of a cultural exchange there. I believe that the idea of having meals served in courses, which everyone just probably assumes it's a French idea, actually came from Russia. Because they had to keep the food hot. See? Put it all in the middle at the same time. Stuff goes cold. No good. We're all in the market together. No need to mention the war. Basil faulty. Yeah. What's your success rate at dealing with COVID-19 on my island? On Ginger Island is 100%. No, unfortunately, on my home island of Great Britain, where I am now, it's been awful. I think we have the worst death rate in the world of all developed nations. Anyway, right, airstrip 1. I agree. Right, I'm hoping we're not dating this too much by making references to COVID. So in 4 years' time, when someone watches us back on YouTube, they're like, what the hell is he going on about? What's this thing? What's this COVID? Who's this Boris Johnson person? Oh, that'd be great, wouldn't it? Anyway, so thank you for joining me, and I'm going to sign off now. Next week I'll be talking about Albania, which also has a very interesting past where everyone's just kind of got in and caused trouble, and but Albania, I'll probably say that it's kind of like the Calamity James of countries. Like everything that could go wrong in a country basically went wrong for Albania. But it's a beautiful place. What can I say? It's got a beautiful coast, it's got great beaches, it's got some things going for it, and one day, hopefully in the next decade, people will go back to Afghanistan and it will be a place where people can go again. But we've been hoping that for the last 20 years. So, wouldn't hold your breath. But if that does happen, I would love you to join me on a trip back to Afghanistan at some point. And obviously, before I go, quick plug for my book, Man of the World by Graham Hughes. That's me. If you go to my website, grahamdavidhughes.com, and send me a message on there, anyone can send a message. I'll get you a copy of this and I'll sign it too if you like. But it's about the first year of my journey to every country in the world without flying. And I cover 133 countries and 6 territories in the first year. And I'm currently working on the sequel, which is called Top of the World, when I cross the Himalayas in a minibus. Right, okay, long history. It's all good. So until next time, thanks for watching. And I need to think of some way of signing these off, shouldn't I? I think I'll say fair winds. That's a good way of signing it off, isn't it? That's the sort of thing that people say. Fair winds, traveller. Yeah, that sounds good. I'll do that. Okay, until next time, fair winds, traveller.